Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our budget reaction. My name's Sarah Fitzgerald, and I head up the viticulture sector at Carpenter Box, and I'm also a partner within the Business Services Group. And I'm joined by my colleague, David Crowther, who some of you may remember from our summary last year, who is head of our personal client tax services and very well versed in all things budget 2025. Morning, David. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, no, it's been a few
Great.
days, isn't it, since that time? So yeah, I think
Yes.
we've got
Yeah.
a bit more time to digest some of these
Yeah.
things. Absolutely.
And yeah, and obviously, yeah, there's been a lot of talk in the press. However, obviously picking out the finer detail takes some time, and probably yet still waiting for some of that to come out, I would imagine.
Yeah, some. I mean, I think in terms of things that are particularly important to our sort of GB wine members, I think there was a lot trailed around what might happen, whether it's VAT cuts, whether it's big reforms to stamp duty, and lots and lots of other things. Rumours swirling around. Actually, most of those things just didn't come to pass. So really, I think probably the headline position is that there doesn't seem to be any specific measures targeted at, I don't know, fostering, helping grow, develop. You might say wine producing business in the UK, sadly, which I think is probably a theme from this budget and previous ones, I'm afraid.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of sort of saw it as a way to discuss it. Might be looking at the different aspects that the WineGB members have from their point of view. So some of that will be employment, some will be, personal finance, investment, and then maybe something like inheritance tax. So I thought if we started to talk about the business running aspects, then that would be a good place.
Yeah. Okay,
So what did you take away? I mean, it seemed to me that probably things just are getting more and more expensive for businesses.
Yes, I mean, I think that's right. Yeah, I mean, I think, what if someone looking at the budget thinking, am I up or am I down personally, or as a business in relation to that? And the vast majority will be down, okay, because obviously it's a tax raising budget. I think sort of measures that I think are important to note or relevant because of their impact, or relevant because they're happening in the nearest future. Obviously, alcohol duty rising in line with RPI from February next year. So I think it's about 3.6, 3.7% increase from February next year. I guess that will has an impact on prices. We've got changes to things like minimum wages from April next year. So so there's sort of upward cost pressures as a result of those two changes. I think there is some measure of relief, probably not putting us into a position where we're ahead, but there's some expanding the relief for apprenticeships from people who are under 21 to people who are 25. I think that'll be relevant for some businesses, and I think the sort of the business rates relief for retail and hospitality and leisure was temporary and is now fixed from April next year. There might be some value in there for.
Now it's under 500,000, is it?
Yeah, correct. So that's right.
Yeah.
So I think that's very relevant for some businesses.
Okay, great.
So yeah, I think those things are netted together. I think there's just more cost pressure into that, I would say.
So if you're a vineyard or a wine producer, you can now go and get an apprentice under the age of 25, and what's the benefit of that?
So I suppose it's not their cost, sadly, but I think their sort of training and exam costs and things like that can be fully supported, for people who are under 25. So you might say we still got the costs of employing them, right, in that scenario, but yeah, we've got relief for that sort of training and development cost, which is good. And I think for some younger people, there's also an employer's NIC relief as well. So I think there's some measures there to sort of try.
Yeah.
So
you could take like a university graduate and then bring them on.
Correct. Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So and I think that there's a collection of measures trying to sort of address youth unemployment. So is there something there that one can take advantage or provides a benefit that we didn't have the previous day? So yeah, I think that's certainly a positive. But if you look at it in the round, it probably for the vast majority of people you're not in the money, I would say that.
No. And the salary sacrifice that was in place, But I mean,
Yes.
that's being capped now, isn't it, for the
Yeah,
pensions?
well, so it's. I mean, in some ways, it's a little bit kicked down the road. So, salary sacrifice is sometimes valuable for employees and potentially for employers as well. But it's limited to £2,000, but from April 2028. So, I think there's probably a
Quite a way
lot
in the
of
future. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of water to pass under the bridge
Yeah.
between now and then.
Okay.
And I think, as we'll see on things like agricultural business relief, it's pre-announced well in advance, and actually it's tweaked and it's tweaked and it's tweaked prior to then. So I
Yeah.
think, what does it mean now for people? What does it mean now for business owners, who are employing people under salary sacrifice? Well, one's mindful of the fact that that change is going to happen. But I don't know that means a huge amount of activity right now, I would say.
Great. Brilliant. So, from an employee's or an employer's point of view,
Mm,
just things going to get tighter.
mm.
When we're thinking about the structure that businesses in this industry should be in, we have a lot set up as LLPs,
Yep. Mhm, mhm.
and then some are functioning as limited companies.
Yep. Mhm, mhm.
Have you got any comments on that? I mean, obviously the dividend tax rate has gone up,
Yeah,
so
yeah. That's it. Yeah. So I think structure is it's increasingly more important actually in yes, for this industry, but for others as well. But yeah, certainly over the last few years, we've seen increases in corporation tax, increases in dividend tax, and actually, yeah, from April of next year, there's a 2% increase in the dividend tax rate for basic rate and higher rate payers. So when you're looking at what's the net take home cost of your company profits, if you're a higher rate pay, you're losing more than half in that
Mhm.
scenario. So yeah, that is relevant. As I don't know that a 2% increase on its own suddenly just has everyone sort of tearing up structures or doing anything dramatic. But I think that cumulative effect of changes, going back several years, I think it questions, it puts a question around structure. But I think actually sometimes the biggest sentiment that you hear is not so much around changing structures to adopt these things, but actually people just feeling like they don't quite want to invest as much as they used to,
Yeah.
or do those things because the tax rate collectively is, for all people, is so high. Is it worth investing? So I think that's a challenge I think facing a lot of businesses, whether you're asking for investment or you're trying to sort of develop something and take your project forward. You're battling, I think, a bit of negative sentiment from investors and
So
others
yeah,
because
so it's almost negative growth
well,
in a
exactly. Yeah.
way,
What is
potentially.
it? Well, indeed. Yeah. That's it. And I think, yeah, if we're pushing tax rates up, I don't think that encourages people to put their hand in their pocket or take risks,
Mm.
frankly.
Mm.
And I think, yeah, you'll see, you're battling that if you're trying to grow and develop your business, attract maybe some investment. It feels like it's a budget that it doesn't make that easier necessarily. I mean, one thing I would say just is around EIS. So I think some businesses can qualify for EIS, and that's some tax incentives, really valuable tax incentives for investors. So
Mhm.
you might say a little benefit potentially in the budget is that the size of those businesses that qualify for that has increased or increases from April. So previously, if you had gross assets of 15 million or more, you were too big to attract EIS relief for investors, and that grows to 30 million from April. So I think if you've got businesses who were previously told, no, you're a bit too big for EIS, couldn't attract those investors for that reason, maybe they can now in that scenario. So I suppose that could be a little help.
And then just talking about the NLPs, obviously,
Mm.
as far as I'm aware, there's no changes to income offset.
Uh,
Because
no,
a lot of WineGB members will be making losses initially, huge
Mhm.
investments at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No. I think we're okay in that sense as we were before. I think there was certainly talk before the budget about whether LLP profits would be subject to employers' national insurance. So a lot of law firms,
Yes.
for
Yeah, I
example, are
read
set up
that.
as
Yeah.
LLPs, and a lot of lawyers thinking, actually, I want to, what we're going to do. But actually, that didn't come to pass. So yeah, we've got GBY members part of LLPs. Then yeah, we escape any of those things, thankfully.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. Brilliant. Okay, that's
Mhm.
marvelous. Um, so then moving on to probably one of the things that really affects our YNGB members, there's got a lot of people that are falling under alcohol duty.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
there's been absolutely no let up in that from what I can see. We've still got the
No.
same tax on cellar door as we have
Mhm.
on any other means of selling the
Indeed.
alcohol.
Mhm. Mhm.
And also the small producer relief is generally unavailable to
Mhm.
winemakers based on
Yeah.
the alcohol percentage in
Yes. Yeah.
wine. So
Yes, sadly, yeah, that's
yeah,
yeah.
does
If we
doesn't seem to have been even considered at this stage. And none of the other alcohol producers either seem to get any break either. So
No,
yeah,
no.
okay.
Indeed, it was in it together to some extent. Yeah. Right.
And then probably the next sort of aspect to look at is, the individual investor or the individual business owner's
Yeah.
personal situation. So,
Yeah. Hmm.
so they're already looking at probably less profits or bigger losses, depending on where they are in their
Sure.
investment cycle.
Yeah.
And yeah, what do you do with that? So obviously, things like how do you mitigate some of the taxes that would come to pass in an event? So something like selling off the vineyard or selling the land, passing it on to relatives, immediate sort of
Yeah.
relatives like children, or even, sadly on death, what would happen in that
Yeah.
situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a couple of things that are sort of, you might say, noteworthy, I suppose, in relation to people having, thinking about those sorts of issues. I mean, you recall from October last year, there was a huge reform to business relief and agricultural relief for IHT purposes. So, a really a seismic change to say the unlimited relief that existed for business and agricultural assets, goes, and actually each individual has £1 million allowance. Which sounds like a lot, but I think to the man on the street. But I think actually when we're talking about the capital value of land, farms, and businesses, people have operated for generations with with that unlimited relief for business and agricultural assets. So that's a huge change that comes in from April of next year. So there's certainly been a lot of planning, a lot of discussion with those clients to say, well, this is coming. What do we do about it? So people, I think that's certainly something that should be on people's radar if they
So
haven't done something about it. But I think what was happening in the budget just gone is that there was a requirement that the £1 million allowance is only available per individuals, and that doesn't transfer to, let's say, your spouse or your civil partner on your death. And we never quite worked out why that wasn't why that policy was, why that wasn't allowed, because that is allowed for your your 325,000 nil rate band.
yes,
In this budget, they have said, well, that million allowance will now add on to your spouse or civil partner on your death. We know a lot of people who've actually gone about changing some of their wills already to ensure that the £1 million allowance is preserved by, for example, moving their share of the farm or the business not to their spouse but to a trust or to their family on their death. So actually, I think people who have made changes to those wills might not need to have done so, might need to review those things as well. So business owners of agricultural land, April 26, big changes. But actually, if you've already made some changes, for example, to your will in anticipation of what you thought would happen, you might actually need to go back and have another look at that point. So I think that's certainly a point from the budget. And the other thing, which is
so big message there is, sorry, is April 26. So if you haven't thought about this yet, although we're talking like the year before's budget, make sure you have at least considered it, because once you get to April 26, there's not a lot more you can do.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I think is particularly relevant, whether it's owners of agricultural land, whether it's owners of businesses, or in some cases trusts that are owners of those assets, is there some action required pre-April 2026, whether it's moving assets out of the trust, whether it's moving assets potentially into a trust. So that isn't that I would say that there's a sizable population of trustees and business and owners of agricultural property that might well want to consider that. So it's not half of everyone, but I think there's a sizable minority that might think, actually, do you know what? I want to take advantage of moving some of these assets into a trust whilst the relief is unlimited. After April of next year, for example, you're limited to £1 million on what you can put into a trust without attracting a 20% IHT charge. So yeah, as an important message to be considered. I say not from this budget when it was tweaked very slightly, but actually from the previous budget. But as I say, even those who've given some thought to those
need to think
might
again.
have changed their wills, might just need to go back and say, hang on a minute, thank you, Rachel.
Right.
It'd been great to have known that earlier at an earlier time, and we might need to change back again in that scenario. The other thing just to put on people's radar as well is I suppose what's referred to as the mansion tax. So from this is April 2028 for values over 2.5 million. We begin to have this sort of what's referred to as the annual mansion tax, sort of like an additional council tax cost. But it's way down the road.
This
I
is
think there's a consultation. Go on.
Is this your principal private
Yes,
residence?
exactly, for homes,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's certainly relevant for people who've got valuable homes as part of their farm, part of what they do. I think there's a consultation at the moment on what is in and what is out. So I don't think it's
Okay.
clear at the moment as to
Yeah.
whether in the final in the final policy who will be in, who will be out. The government have actually made clear that there is no that won't apply to council tax homes, which so they've made that point that if there are council tax homes worth more than that, they won't fall within those charges. But yeah, they haven't sort of clarified. Well, hang on a minute. Let's say I've got a farm, which includes a farmhouse, for example.
Yes. Where does that
Is that in or
start?
is that
Yeah.
out in
Yeah.
that context? So I think we'll
Yeah.
see some more. But again, it's April 2028. A lot of water to pass under the bridge between now and then.
Yeah.
But certainly people
That's
with
quite
valuable
interesting
homes.
because there's been some, in the past tax breaks around, farmhouses because they're seen as a working asset, whereas this, might just see it
That's,
as a
yeah.
home. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
exactly. I think what's
yeah.
the space is the
Yeah.
answer to that. We'll see what comes out eventually. But certainly for people with valuable homes, I think they're within the scope of inheritance tax anyway. I don't think this alone causes people to downsize necessarily or to dispose of the home to their family to some extent. But I think again it just adds, doesn't it, to that sort of
Mm.
list of reasons to think about doing that. Yeah, if the 40p reason wasn't enough to think about
Yeah.
putting your £2.5 million home into some sort of trust or to giving away or do something about it. This extra cash cost. Does that encourage people to think again about that? It probably does. Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm thinking about sort of the average, I'm sure there is an average, but your general vineyard, you have to invest a lot of money to get a vineyard up and running. It's a
Mm.
long-term project.
Yeah.
You don't have a huge amount of flexibility year on year. You can't say, well, okay, this year we won't grow the grapes and next year we will.
Sure.
You're in it. You're in it
Yeah.
and you're committed. So in summary, to me, it's sort of almost like batten down the hatches a bit.
Mm, mm, mm,
Be
mm,
careful of cash flow, as ever. Cash is
mm,
king.
mm,
And potentially look at any ways you can to mitigate longer term tax bills. So
mhm,
capital gains tax, inheritance tax, potentially in the future, looking at maybe some trust planning to do
mhm,
that.
mhm.
And then, how do you carry on a day-to-day business level? And again, there don't seem to be that many advantages. It just seems that everything is getting a lot more costly.
Mm.
That all sounds very negative.
No, no,
I'm
it is,
being too
and I try.
negative.
Yeah, no. But I think you can get swept up in that because it's
Yeah.
easy to think, well, actually, if the government doesn't want to support this and wants to work against me, if that's how a lot of people feel that's what a lot of people say to me. That it feels like sometimes, I want to pack up, I'll take my ball and go home. I don't really want to play anymore. So I think that's the sort of negative sentiment that I get from lots of business owners, lots of clients in all sectors, really. So I think in trying to find the positive somewhere, actually, spending the money, my example, of withdrawing the money from the business and paying the tax, let's say in a company setting, it's
Yeah.
never been more expensive to withdraw it. So you could argue you've never had more tax to be saved from reinvesting now
So if people can afford to
than in
leave it
reality.
there, leave it there is what you're kind of
Well,
saying.
indeed,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So
Yeah.
again, trying to find some sort of positive in there, that actually to withdraw it and consume it and spend it, it probably will cost you a lot of money, particularly in a company setting. So yeah, actually, can you reinvest in some way, I suppose? But yeah, you're battling against that negative sentiment.
So despite all the negative message, what's the positive news for if I was a vineyard and I'm
Mm, mm.
looking for investment?
Yep. Mhm.
Are there some positives to take away from this? And
Yes.
specifically, I'm more interested about what about some foreign investors maybe
Mhm.
or new
Mhm.
investors to
Yeah.
the wine market?
Yeah, well, certainly, as there's a couple of points I think. So one is around EIS. I think for some businesses that is accessible, but I think it's worth remembering when we talk about the big changes to business relief and agricultural relief that were announced last October, certainly very impactful for the owners of the business. But still, if you're an investor in that business and you still got £1 million of IHT free assets. So if you took up to £1 million out of cash and invested it in a vineyard, in 2 years' time, that is not subject to 40% inheritance tax. So that is an incentive. Now, clearly, it's a different investment proposition to having cash, okay, to doing something like that. But I think that should
Yeah.
certainly be on the front of anyone's mind if they're looking to raise money in a business that, for example, qualifies as a
Yeah.
business. Then I think that is that needs to be front and center of explaining that to investors. And certainly, if you can get it into EIS as well, you've got the IHT relief and the sort of income tax reliefs as well. So I think that would be something worth highlighting for those looking to raise money. Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So worth definitely getting the right message out there.
Sure,
Yeah, from a
absolutely.
tax perspective.
Mhm.
Marvelous.
Mhm.
I think that covers the majority of things that will affect the WineGB members. Is there anything else you think that we should have covered or
No,
have
I think those are
missed?
the highlighted points. I think certainly there's several points to follow up on later on. Like I say, the mansion tax aspect. I think, as I say, I think the April 26th deadline is how I would describe it for people thinking about
Mm.
inheritance tax and those with business and agricultural assets is relevant. I think that was relevant before the budget, tweaked very slightly by it, but I think those are things for people to think about very, very carefully. And as I say, I think you're just battling that sort of negative sentiment. So as I say, you've got to double down on your positivity to get the business to thrive. I think, yeah.
And from a practical point of view, I sort of covered it from this angle is, always look at the effect of these rises on your projected cash flow and your forecasting. I do find that people get very much into budgeting and forecasting, and then they sort of put it in a drawer and carry on with real life. So yeah,
Yes.
it's well
Yeah.
worth. It
I
might
think
sound obvious. I'm sure people will be on people's minds, but then, as I say, real life takes over. So definitely look at the effect of any of these increases
yeah.
going
Yeah,
forward.
I think as a tax guy, sometimes you're not necessarily involved in that budgeting process, but it's really important to
Yeah,
update that to reflect all of the things that we've spoken about for sure.
yeah, great, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, and
No problem. Thanks, Sarah.
thanks for your time. And obviously, if any WineGB members have got any questions or queries, please can you email Gillian at WineGB, and I'm sure she'll pass those queries on to us, and we can either answer directly or we can put it up on the WineGB forum. And more than happy if people contact us directly as well at Carpenter Box. You can either do that through our info email or just contact David or myself. Thank you.